Well, it is great to see you this weekend as we continue this series, Curtain Call, this series where we're looking at these different characters in the story of Christmas and asking ourselves, where do we see ourselves in this story? What can we learn from this story? What can we glean from these different characters? We started in week 1 with Joseph, and we said Joseph experienced an incredible disruption, and when you experience disruptions, as you will, let the divine determine your direction. And then we moved into week 2 with Herod, and we said, you know what, let's just be honest. We've all got a Herod inside of us. We need to look out for the Herod inside of us, because what's true is when we encounter Jesus, we're either going to see him as a threat to our kingdom or as an invitation to his. Now we're continuing this series this week, and we're going to look at a very interesting but kind of underrated character in the Christmas story this week. Well, I often come to this stage with some version of like a story about something that's going on in my family. In fact, it's kind of a joke in our family that like whatever happens is fair game for Dad to use as sermon illustrations. And I talk about the dumb things my kids do or the lessons they need to learn or things like that. But actually, I want to talk about a lesson I learned from one of my kids one time pretty recently. So I'm driving, and maybe you've had an experience like this, but I'm driving, I'm approaching an intersection, I can see up ahead a bunch of brake lights, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. And the closer I get, it's not just brake lights, it's like police lights and some tow truck lights and I realize, okay, we've had a fender bender in here, and the closer I get, the more I realize, oh, I'm getting through slowly, but not only that, I can't go where I wanted to go. Like they've blocked off the lane where I want to go. And so I'm driving and I'm sitting here and I go, oh, this is just great. Why does this have to, it's going to take me 2 more blocks. I'm going to have to turn around. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is just what I need right now. And my 12-year-old goes, I hope they're okay. And in that moment, I had this like dawning comprehension wash over me that there are other people in this world too, besides just me. I don't know if this kind of thing happens to you, but where you're just in a spot where you realize, oh my goodness, the only person I was thinking about right now is me. Just myself, just what's going on with me. It happens to me. I know it happens to you because it's how we're wired. In fact, it's just kind of a human nature to be the main character in our own story. In fact, here's what's true. That was supposed to be the first point. These ordinary people we're going to do this. The reason for the series is that these ordinary people serve as mirrors and motivators for us. Ordinary people because they're just like us. Mirrors because we can see ourselves in them. Motivators because we can learn from them. I'll give you a second to finish writing that. And then back to where we were. Here's what's true. We are the main characters in our own story. And what ultimately happens in all of us is this. We have a predisposition toward preoccupation with our own lives. We have a predisposition toward preoccupation with our own lives. Again, we can get to the point where we didn't mean to. It's not because we're necessarily selfish. It's not because we're evil. It's not because we hate other people. It's just because like my brain is just full with what's going on with me. We have a predisposition toward preoccupation with our own lives. It can happen at work. There's so many deadlines in my own brain that I don't even notice something that's going on with a coworker. It can happen at home. My to-do list, my agenda, my frustrations with what's going on here, and I don't even notice what's going on with a spouse or with one of my kids. And the more that's going on in life, the more this becomes true. Where we become more and more preoccupied just with what's going on with me. So we forget to call mom. We forget to check in on that friend who's sick. We saw that person had a baby and we were like, oh, I should reach out or I should send a card. And we don't. And the reason we don't isn't because we don't care about them. It's just because we are preoccupied with what's going on in our own lives. It's not just that like I'm so busy. It's that I'm so preoccupied with my own stuff that I forgot, oh, there's other people in the world too. We can be preoccupied with what's going on. But here's the thing, those other people in the world, those other people in your world, here's what's true about how you feel about them. You actually want to make a good impact on them. Like, you actually want to be known by them as a good dad, a good mom, a good friend, a valuable coworker that makes the workplace better, somebody that they can count on, somebody who adds value to their life. I mean, when I think of the people around me in my life, I want them to say about me, where would I be if it weren't for Jeremiah? What a guy. He was there for me when I needed him. And I know you want that too, but here's just the problem. Here's just what's true about those people in our lives. We can't have an impact outward with eyes turned inward. We can't have an impact outward with eyes turned inward. We want to leave others better than we found them. We want to be a net positive in the world around us. We want to add value, but that is not going to happen when our minds, brains, and hearts are just full of what's going on with me. One of the greatest threats and limiters to our chance to be the kind of person we want to be is preoccupation with self. We're less empathetic. We're less likely to notice other people. We're less likely to take the time to care or be thoughtful. I can't be the only one who sometimes is like really busy and scrolling through my phone, and I see a post that starts with like, please pray for me because, and I'm like, oh, don't have time for that. I got enough going on with me. Anybody else ever feel that way? It's not because you hate other people. It's just because you're so preoccupied with what's going on with you. You're busy. You're overwhelmed. You don't feel like giving. You don't feel like caring. You don't feel like serving. And Christmas time just puts this on blast, right? So Christmas time, the Hallmark movie kind of version of what it's supposed to be is like, we're all more generous right now. We're all more hospitable and caring, and the best version of us comes out right now. But you know that right now, you and everybody around you is living at about 130% of your normal demand. Like, there's more things to take care of, more places to be, more things to buy, more things to do. And what comes out of you is not the best version of yourself. What comes out of you and out of me is like the irritable version, the grumpy version, the short, impatient, ugly version. It's the most wonderful time. And it's not. Ask anybody in food service, ask anybody in the service industry, retail, man, they would say it is not the most wonderful time of the year. You look in the mirror and you see it yourself. We can't have an impact outward with eyes turned inward. We can't be what we want to be when we're preoccupied with self. And so the question is it possible to be the kind of person I want to be? When here's what's out of my control, life is overwhelming. Like, life is busy, life is hard, and it just gets more busy and more complicated, and it's not just a season, it's actually just the way life goes. It's just more all the time. And can I be the kind of person I want to be when life is overwhelming? Well, we're going to look today at a person who had every reason to be preoccupied. A person who had so much going on in her own life, and yet, in a critical moment, she took her eyes off of herself. She put them on somebody else in such a way that her impact is still felt in a story that we read 2,000 years later. Let's go ahead and let's look at Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1, and we're going to pick it up in verse 26. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy. Okay, pause. I thought the Christmas story was about Mary, Joseph. Maybe there's like a drummer boy thrown in there, but like, who's this Elizabeth person? Well, if we were to go back and pick it up at the beginning of Luke, what we would find out is Elizabeth is a person who she's married to this priest Zechariah. They're both very well along in years. They're old. They've been praying their whole lives that God would give them a baby. They've been faithful. They've been righteous, but God has not given them a baby. He hasn't answered their prayers. And here they are, well past the age that anybody ought to still be praying for a baby. And one day, Zechariah's turn at the temple in his priestly duties, he goes in, he encounters an angel. Now, this is not normal. And the angel says to him, Zechariah, your prayers have been heard. In fact, even more than that, you and Elizabeth are going to have a baby, and your baby is going to prepare the way for the Messiah. Zechariah goes, how can this be? We're really, really old. The angel goes, God's got it. Elizabeth is pregnant. Elizabeth secludes herself for 5 months from society, just kind of processing everything that this means for her, for Zechariah. And she says, man, God has got my life under control, and he's taken away this disgrace from me. And here she is with Elizabeth's got some stuff going on in her life. Every reason to be preoccupied with what's going on. And in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, let's pick it up here. God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, the descendant of David. The virgin's name was, say it with me, Mary. Now we know this story. Now this is the one we kind of come back to every year. Mary, Joseph, angel. Angel says, you're going to have a baby. She goes, how can that be? I'm a virgin. Angel says, God's got it. Don't worry about it. This is going to happen. Mary processes all of that. And then ultimately she says back to the angel several verses later, I'm the Lord's servant, Mary answered. May your word to me be fulfilled. Then the angel left her. Now Mary just said, okay, I'm in. I'll sign on for that. May your word to me be fulfilled. But I don't know that we understand what a bomb was just dropped on Mary's life in this moment. A bomb that has fallout in every relationship in her life. I mean, her relationship with Joseph is impacted by this. Her relationship with her family dynamic is severely impacted by this. Her friend group is probably just gone. Society is looking at her side-eyed now and questioning. She's either crazy or she's lying, but whatever it is, it can't be true. And Mary is in this very vulnerable, very painful place in her life. And look what happens in the very next verse. It says this, at that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. Here's Elizabeth again, 6 months pregnant. And Mary shows up on her doorstep, not for like a little afternoon visit. I mean, Mary's not showing up with like a Starbucks going, hey, it was buy one, get one. Do you want to have a coffee with me? She showed up with like all her bags, looking for a new place to live because the place where she was living was not safe for her right now. She's a refugee from a society that had turned on her. She's looking for a place where she can go and she can not wear the scarlet letter. And here's Elizabeth, 6 months pregnant, saying to her, oh, okay, great. I mean, the nursery's not, painted yet. But I suppose I could move the crib. 80 years old, swollen ankles. Let me just waddle on upstairs and make up a bed for you. Any eating preferences, gluten-free, dairy, what are we doing? Like all of a sudden, she had so much going on in her own life, and yet here she is going, I'm receiving you into my home. I'm creating a safe place for you. I'm going to meet your need for shelter and for family and for people to take care of you. And she does that. And then we watch this interaction here between Elizabeth and Mary. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Now we're going to watch an encounter unfold And some of it is going to be stuff that you're like, wow, that's crazy, that's supernatural. For the sake of today's conversation, I want you to watch for the things that are natural. I want you to see what Elizabeth does in this encounter that are like repeatable in our own lives. Because it's powerful what she does with Mary in this moment. So we continue and we see, in a loud voice, she exclaimed. And here's what I want to say. There's a lot of things that have been said to and about Mary in a quiet voice. They haven't been good. But in a loud voice, Elizabeth exclaims this, "Blessed are you among women." This word blessed means like worthy to be praised. She is calling her blessed. Now, Mary has been called a lot of names: liar, cheater, crazy, whatever word you want to use that's a slur for a person who sleeps around. Mary's been called all those names. You know what she hasn't probably been called in a long, long time? Blessed. And Elizabeth just speaks life into her and says, you are blessed. And then, look at this, and blessed is the child you will bear. Can you imagine being Mary? People are already hating on your unborn child that you're carrying and saying things about your baby and what that does to wreck your heart. And then Elizabeth goes, I love your baby. Blessed is the child that you will bear. Can you imagine what that does in Mary's soul? And then it continues and we see this. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, here's the miraculous part. She couldn't have known that Mary was carrying the Messiah. And what's going on with a baby leaping in her womb for joy? That's just an amazing, beautiful part of this encounter. As soon as this happened, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. But then listen, she's blessed her once, she's blessed her twice, and look what she does a third time. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her. Blessed are you for believing this. Like, good on you, Mary. You are on the right track. Believing this has probably been one of the hardest things you've been able to do. Not just that like you would be pregnant, but that like God would see you through all this. But blessed are you for believing this. And you know what, Mary? I believe you. And you know what, Mary? I believe in you. And you know what, Mary? I am believing this with you. Man, Elizabeth has so much going on in her own life, and yet she just pours this courage into Mary. She encourages her. That's the meaning of the word. Like when you encourage somebody, you just pour courage into them. And that's what Elizabeth does to Mary in this moment. The next 10 verses, if you look in your Bible, are called Mary's Song. In the Latin, it's called the Magnificat. It's this 10-verse song that Mary responds with after Elizabeth has just poured courage into her and just poured life into her. And then Mary erupts in this beautiful 10-verse long song of praise about God's goodness and his kindness and his faithfulness. And then this passage just wraps up with this line. Mary stayed with Elizabeth for about 3 months and then returned home. There's a lot between these lines. Mary stayed with Elizabeth during Mary's first trimester and Elizabeth's last trimester. Okay, so Mary is like, Elizabeth, can you hold my hair? I've got morning sickness, I'm throwing up. And Elizabeth is like crying during commercials and feeling like a cow and doesn't know what's going on with her hormones and her emotions. What a mess that house must have been. Let's not forget, Elizabeth is like 80-something. But in that 3 months where Mary stayed there, you know what got to happen? Mary didn't get to learn how to be pregnant, how to do this prenatal life from anybody else. She didn't have what to expect when you're expecting. She wasn't signed up for the class at the Y. And she didn't have mom or sisters or friends around. You know who taught her how to go through a pregnancy? Elizabeth did. You know who taught her how to deal with a husband who's had angel visits? Elizabeth did. You know who taught her how to function when society's looking sideways at you? Elizabeth did. And for 3 months while Mary stays there, Elizabeth just takes her life experience and she pours it into Mary. And then at the end it says, and then Mary returned home. She was ready. She stepped into what God had called her to do because of what Elizabeth had poured into her. When we think of the Christmas story, it's easy to go to the stuff on the Christmas card. Mary, Joseph, star, some donkeys, some angels and shepherds and magi and all that stuff, and forget the fact that this main character, Mary, needed somebody in her life who would receive her in a time of need and meet that need. Needed somebody in her life who would pour life into her and encourage her with words. Needed somebody in her life who was going to teach her what to do in the situation that she was in. And the main characters that we see are profoundly propped up by a supporting character in this story that we dare not look past, because God included Elizabeth for a reason in this story. And as we think about a mirror, we can see in Elizabeth, man, she was overwhelmed. She had every reason to be preoccupied. But as we think about a motivator, Elizabeth seized the opportunity to, instead of saying, I'm going to limit my life to what's going on with me, she said, I'm going to leverage my life to lift you up. I'm going to leverage my life to lift you up. I want to say to you today, you or I will never, ever, ever be in this exact situation. Angels, miracle pregnancies, prophecies, tons of weird stuff. But the principles that just happened in the story that just played out is a situation that you and I are in almost every day of our lives. And at the core of what we just saw happen is a person had to make a choice. Am I going to be preoccupied with what's going on with me? Or am I going to say to somebody else in the scene, I'm here for you? Elizabeth said, I'm going to say to Mary, I will leverage my life to lift you up. This idea of having a strategic, intentional response to somebody else in which you see the moment where you go, I know what I can do in order to give them what they need so that they can move forward. And I'm going to be that supporting character to move them forward so that they would be able to say about me, you were there when I needed you. You added value to my life because you leveraged your life to lift me up. Powerful, powerful story based on a beautiful choice to say, even though I've got so much going on, I'm going to leverage my life to lift you up. Now, we want to make an impact in people's lives. We struggle when we're preoccupied with everything going on in our life. We'd love for the end of our story to be something like what happened in this story, where we're powerfully invested in somebody else's life. But how do we get from there? How do we get from here to there? How do we turn those inward eyes to be able to move outward? There's some really practical behind-the-scenes steps that I want to share with you right now. It's really hard to look outward at anybody else when I'm consumed with what's happening with me. It's really hard to care about somebody else's circumstance when I'm worried about what's going on right here with my own circumstance. And so the first step to be able to do this, Christians, is this, to acknowledge God's sovereign role in my circumstance. I'm going to flesh that out in a minute, but write it down. Acknowledge God's sovereign role in my circumstance. Elizabeth was able to hold up Mary because Elizabeth knew God was holding up Elizabeth. Acknowledge God's sovereign role in my circumstance. Elizabeth was never more preoccupied, never more overwhelmed than at this point in her life, but she was also never more aware that the person behind every moving part in her life was a sovereign God who had it under control. And so because of that, she was able to say, I can leverage my life to lift somebody else up because he's got my life in his hands. Marcy will sometimes come home and she'll have groceries and she'll say, hey, can you help me bring in the groceries? Well, one time I had my laptop in my hands and I was like, yes, I can help you bring in the groceries. But I looked to see which member of my family am I going to hand the laptop to? And my ability to free up my hands to help her was totally dependent on my trust in who's holding my thing. Your ability to be able to look at somebody and go, I can help you carry your stuff, depends on how much do you actually acknowledge God's sovereignty in the way that he is carrying your stuff. If you can say he's got me, then you can say I've got you. Do you believe that you can cast your cares on him because he cares for you? Do you believe that the details of your life do not escape the attention of your sovereign God? Because if you believe that the sovereign God has attention on you, you know what? That frees up mental margin, that frees up emotional margin, and it frees up attention to be able to say, well, I can put attention on somebody else. He's got me, so I got you. And that's what Elizabeth was able to do, and that's what we are able to do. A lot of times a person shows up on the scene in front of us and we go, oh, now I can deal with this on top of everything else that I'm already dealing with, right? You feel that. When we believe that God's actually got a sovereign grasp over our lives, on top of turns to instead of. I can deal with this instead of everything else that I'm preoccupied with. Because God's got me, so I got you. I know that when we think about this, it is so easy for us to say, okay, yeah, great. But really the thing that would make all the difference is if I just had more margin. If I just had more time, had more room on my plate, maybe had more money. But let me tell you this, and you know this. The people who are actually best at leveraging their life to lift other people up are actually not people that have a ton of margin in their lives. They're people just that do this well. They're people that spend the kind of time with the Lord that gives them the confidence before they start their day that they go, Lord, I know that you've got me. And so when something comes, I can help them. I can leverage my life to lift somebody else up. And because God's got your health concern, your financial question, that relationship, that family dynamic, well, when that neighbor shows up and they need help, or when that coworker shows up and they need care, or when that friend shows up and they need advice, you can. Because God's got me, so I got you. Because I acknowledge God's sovereign role in my circumstance. So I can leverage my life to lift you up. And then the next step is this, to assume the supporting role in this circumstance. Assume the supporting role in this circumstance. We look at this story, and Elizabeth is 100% all about Mary. We go back and we just even look at the pronouns that are used and throughout the whole time. She's saying, bless her, you. Bless her, you. I've got a home for you. You can stay with me. The only time Elizabeth says I is when she goes, why am I so highly favored that you would be here with me? Elizabeth, before the scene even started unfolding, had already assumed the role of supporting character in this scene. Sometimes in training or things like that, you'll do role play, if you're practicing for an interview. Or maybe if you're practicing in a counseling situation, conflict resolution. Marcy and I sometimes will Like, we'll choose like who's going to be good cop, bad cop when we have to like interrogate one of our kids about like why there's Cheez-Its in the couch or why they lied about their chores. And before they even come in, we decide, like, what role am I going to play? This is the reality where, like, before somebody even lands in the scene ahead of you, you have already decided, I'm going to assume the supporting role in this circumstance. What circumstance? The meeting you're going to have at work. That person's meeting you for coffee. You're walking in to the house at the end of a busy day. You're going to have that phone call with a person. I'm assuming already the role of supporting character. I'm already deciding what I'm going to do when I get into that space. That family Christmas gathering that you know you don't want to go to because Uncle Mike's going to make it weird and political and somebody's going to tell you how you're failing at raising your kids. That situation, I'm going to assume the supporting role even before I get into that place. You know, a lot of living as a Christian is not actually all that like mysterious. Sometimes it comes down to what we call a predetermined yes. It's just where you say ahead of time, I've already told God that however the situation unfolds, my answer is yes. This is a predetermined yes. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know how it's going to happen. But when it happens, already I'm saying, yes, I'm going to assume the supporting role. We often miss these because we're surprised by them. We didn't see it coming. We didn't expect it. But when at the beginning of the day you say, I don't know what, I don't know when, I don't know who, but I'm already deciding I'm going to be the supporting role when it happens. You are ready to leverage your life to lift somebody up. Okay, I'm able to, I've chosen to, now what? What does it actually look like? And what do we even mean when we say leverage my life to lift you up? Okay, out of this story, there are three things that we see that Elizabeth leveraged and that we can too. They're this: my resources, my words, my experience. My resources, my words, my experience. My resources. Elizabeth said, I'll take care of you. I'll give you what I have. I will meet your need. You can come into my home. I'll feed you. I'll take care of you. Okay? Resources. She met her physical needs. The Bible tells us in 2 Corinthians that God enriches us so that we can enrich other people. God gives you resources so that you can give them to other people when they need them. It's costly. Sometimes it's inconvenient. But I'll leverage my life to lift you up means I'll figure it out in that moment. I will give you a place to stay. I will let you borrow my car. I will give you money you need or tools that you need or time or babysitting or meals. I will leverage my resources to lift you up. My words. Elizabeth said, you're blessed. I believe in you. You're not crazy. I'm proud of you. Good job. Come on, we know that words have more power than we give them credit for. You know that words can build somebody up or crush them. What if we were more intentional about leveraging our words to lift people up? And sometimes the roadblock to that is we go, man, what if it's awkward? What if it sounds corny? What if it's uncomfortable? Can I speak on behalf of people in your life right now? And can I tell you what I think they would want you to hear? What I think your kids or your spouse or your parents or your friends would want you to hear? I would rather hear awkward encouragement from you than no encouragement from you. I would rather you sound stupid than you be silent. Use your words, leverage your words to lift somebody up. Who is a person in your life who needs something that you already have, and how can you leverage your resources? Who is a person in your life who needs to hear something from you, and how can you leverage your words? And then the third one, your experience. Elizabeth was able to pour her experience into Mary. And you've got experience to be able to say, learn from me. And guess what? It works just as well when you say, learn from my victories, as when you say, learn from my failures. You can leverage both of those to lift somebody up, and it's vulnerable, and it feels exposing. And sometimes you're letting people into parts of your story that you'd rather erase. But you know what? Those parts of your story that you'd rather erase, that's what makes you relatable. That's what allows you to have the gift to give somebody else. And so when you think about your divorce, your business startup, the death of a spouse or a parent, your healing, your breakthrough, parenting young children, your experience is something that you can leverage to lift somebody up. And so who is a person in your life who needs to learn from what you've learned? Because come on, you know this is true. Some of the most impactful supporting characters in your story are people who either at a critical moment or in a significant season, they gave you what you needed to have, they told you what you needed to hear, or they taught you what you needed to learn. But the truth is, these don't happen when our eyes are turned inward because we're too preoccupied with what's going on with ourselves. So we have to do the work behind the scenes. We have to be able to say, God's got me, so I got you, and I've already given my predetermined yes to step into this situation and be the supporting character and leverage my resources, my words, my experiences to lift you up. When we're preoccupied, here's the cost. You never know what you're going to miss out on. When we are leveraging our life to lift others up, here's the upside. You never know what you're going to get in on. You never know what story you are going to be a part of. But the reality is that some of the greatest significance in your life will come from your support in others' lives. Some of the greatest significance in your life will come from your support in others' lives. I hope your life is awesome. I hope your life includes a lot of amazing stories. But you know what is most likely true and is also in line with the design of God and how he works in our lives? Some of the best parts of your life is what you invest into other people's lives. Some of the best stories you'll be able to tell is about your support in other people's stories. And how maybe your failure helped somebody else turn it into a victory. How maybe your generosity in a certain moment became a catalyst for somebody else to propel them into something significant. How the right word at the right time made a difference for somebody between a yes or a no in a way that changed their life. Some of the greatest significance of your life will come from your support in others' lives. So our homework this weekend, I hope your mind's already churning in this way, is to identify the who and the how. Is to prayerfully identify the who and the how. Who's the you in that sentence? I will leverage my life to lift you up. Who's the you? Who is the person in your life who needs your words, your resources, your experience to be able to move them forward in what God has for them? And can I ask you, as you try to answer that question, don't look far. Because the truth is, they're probably closer than you think. Because what I hear a bunch of times is a regretful statement of saying, they were right in front of me, but I didn't see them because I was so preoccupied with my own stuff. Don't look far. Prayerfully identify who and how. And my hope is that your relationships, that your workplace, that our church on the other side would be more supportive, more helpful, more loving, because on purpose we're turning our eyes from inward to outward and saying, I'll leverage my life to lift you up. Now, I think we get to about this point, and some of us are probably thinking, I could have used an Elizabeth. Boy, it would have been nice at a certain time in my life to have somebody who was there who said, I see you. I'll help you. I'm here for you. I love you. Here's what I want to say, as we're coming back to Christmas once again this year. Christmas serves as a reminder of something that I think answers one of the deepest questions and needs in our own heart. Because the truth is, you do have somebody in your life who says, I see you, I love you, I'll help you, I know you, I'll give to you. At the heart of Christmas is this reality that Jesus leveraged his life to lift you up. The King of everything gave everything to take everything about us that separated us from God and bear it on himself. And the Christmas story started in a manger, but it moved to a cross. And on that cross, Jesus said, I will leverage my life to lift you up. And if you're wondering if you're loved, the cross says you are. And if you're wondering if that means Jesus is worthy, the cross says it does. And we're never going to get tired of coming back to the cross here at Grace, because I don't think it can possibly be overstated or reminded of enough times that Jesus, the King of everything, leveraged his life to lift you and me up. As we continue to move through Christmas, can we just be reminded of that truth about God and let it shape what we think about us, what we think about him, and how we treat other people around us? Let's pray together. God, you, the King of everything, have done this for us, gave everything to lift us up. And you're not asking us to do anything for somebody else that you haven't already done for us. And so I pray that we would follow well in your footsteps and be people who love and serve and give and care and support. And I pray that through that people would see not just us, but they would see you. And I pray that because you included Elizabeth in this story, and because we saw her as a mirror and a motivator, that what would happen is, God, that we would live more like that in a way that brings you more glory. Thank you for being our King who sacrificed everything and leveraged your life to lift us up. In Jesus' name.